November 20th, 1943. Betio Island, Tarawa Atoll, Gilbert Islands. The pre-dawn darkness gives way to the thunder of naval bombardment as battleships Maryland and Colorado pound Japanese positions with 16-inch shells. In the lagoon, Marines of the 2nd Marine Division wade through chest-deep water, their landing craft grounded on the coral reef 500 yards from shore. Among them, Staff Sergeant William Bordelon of the 1st Battalion, 18th Marines grips his equipment bag containing demolition charges, while his M1911A1 pistol rides secure in its holster, already soaked with seawater but mechanically perfect. The Japanese defenders, 4,500 strong under Rear Admiral Kei Shibazaki, have transformed this tiny coral island, less than 3 square miles, into a fortress. Their officers carry the Type 14 Nambu pistol, the Empire standard sidearm chambered in 8x22mm. As the Marines struggle through the killing field of the lagoon, Japanese machine guns open up from concealed pillboxes. The unexpected low tide has turned what should have been a quick amphibious assault into a desperate wade through waist-deep water under murderous fire. What unfolds over the next 76 hours will demonstrate with mathematical precision the superiority of American small arms design, particularly the M1911A, firing its devastating .45 ACP cartridge over Japanese weapons that fail when needed most. In the close-quarters hell of Tarawa, where combat distances shrink to feet and inches, the difference between a 230-grain bullet delivering 370 foot-pounds of energy and a 100-grain projectile with barely 220 foot-pounds becomes the difference between life and death. The battles raging across the Pacific in 1943 reveal a fundamental truth that transcends mere technical specifications. The chasm between American and Japanese military sidearms reflects not just different design philosophies, but vastly different industrial capabilities, tactical doctrines, and understanding of what makes an effective combat weapon. The M1911A1 automatic pistol. Firing the .45 automatic Colt pistol cartridge represents the culmination of decades of American combat experience and industrial innovation. The Type 14 Nambu, with its underpowered 8mm round and fragile mechanism, embodies Japan's struggle to match Western military technology while lacking the industrial base and combat feedback necessary for effective weapons development. This disparity would manifest itself in every close-quarters engagement, from Guadalcanal to Okinawa, where the thunder of the American .45 consistently overwhelmed the inadequate pop of the Japanese 8mm. The story of these two weapons is more than a tale of ballistics and manufacturing. It is the story of how industrial supremacy and engineering excellence determine victory in modern warfare. The genesis of the M1911A1 lies not in the Pacific, but in the Philippine jungles 4 decades earlier. During the Philippine-American War of 1899 to 1902, American troops faced a horrifying tactical problem that would reshape military sidearm development forever. The Moro Juramados, Muslim warriors who bound their limbs with leather to prevent blood loss and ingested native drugs to dull pain, launched suicidal charges against American positions. The standard Army sidearm, the Colt Model 1892 double-action revolver, chambered in .38 long Colt, proved catastrophically inadequate. Colonel Louis Lagarde documented the typical encounter in his medical reports. Soldiers would empty their revolvers into charging Moros, placing multiple shots center mass, only to watch in horror as their attackers continued forward to kill Americans with blade weapons. Lagarde's 1904 report described Antonio Cospi shot 4 times at close range with 38 rounds, 3 bullets penetrating his lungs, 1 passing completely through his body, who continued fighting until finally stopped by a rifle butt to the forehead. The .38 long Colt's 150-grain bullet at 770 feet per second simply lacked the kinetic energy transfer necessary for immediate incapacitation. This failure prompted the most comprehensive ballistic study ever undertaken for military small arms, the Thompson-Lagarde tests of 1904. Colonel John T. Thompson, who would later develop the Thompson submachine gun, and Major Louis Anatole Lagarde of the Medical Corps were tasked with determining the minimum effective caliber for military pistols. At the Nelson Morris Company Union Stockyards in Chicago, they conducted tests that would be considered barbaric by modern standards, but provided crucial scientific data. The tests involved shooting live cattle and human cadavers with various calibers: 7.65 by 21 mm parabellum, 30 Luga, 9 by 19 parabellum, 38 long Colt, 38 ACP, 45 Colt, 476 Elephant, and 455 Webley. The methodology was precise, recording time to incapacitation for live animals, measuring body sway in suspended cadavers, examining wound channels through dissection, and the newly developed X-ray technology. The results were unequivocal. Animals shot with 30 Luga showed minimal distress even after 10 rounds. Those hit with 9 mm or 38 calibers showed greater effect, but often required 8 or more shots. Animals struck with 45 caliber rounds typically collapsed by the 4th shot, with immediate and severe physiological trauma evident. The cadaver tests revealed even more dramatic differences. When bullets struck bone shafts, the researchers assigned numerical values to body oscillation. The 45 caliber rounds consistently produced 2 to 3 times more movement than smaller calibers. The board's conclusion was absolute. A bullet which will have the shock effect and stopping effect at short ranges necessary for a military pistol or revolver should have a caliber not less than 45 inches. They noted that below this threshold, no amount of velocity increase within handgun parameters could compensate for insufficient bullet mass. John Moses Browning, already renowned for his firearms innovations, had been working with Colt on a 41 caliber semi-automatic pistol when the Army's requirements became clear. Browning rapidly scaled his design to accommodate a 45 caliber cartridge, creating what would become the Model 1905. The cartridge underwent several iterations between Colt, Winchester Repeating Arms, Frankfurt Arsenal, and Union Metallic Cartridge Company. The original loading, a 200-grain bullet at 900 feet per second, evolved into the standardized military load, a 230-grain full metal jacket bullet at 830 feet per second from a 5-inch barrel. The genius of Browning's design lay in its simplicity and robustness. The M1911 utilized a short recoil operation with a swinging link that lowered the barrel out of engagement with the slide during cycling. The single-action trigger provided a consistent, crisp pull. 2 safety mechanisms, a grip safety that must be depressed and a manual thumb safety, prevented accidental discharge while allowing rapid deployment. The 7-round detachable magazine could be quickly changed, and the pistol would fire the chambered round even without a magazine inserted, crucial when magazines were damaged or lost. The pistol underwent extensive testing from 1906 to 1911, competing against designs from Savage, Luga, and others. The torture tests were extraordinary, firing 6,000 rounds as rapidly as possible, accomplished in 27 minutes. Dunking the heated pistol in water, mud, and sand between strings of fire, the Browning Colt design functioned flawlessly. On March 29, 1911, the U.S. Army formally adopted the automatic pistol caliber 45 model of 1911. World War I combat experience led to refinements incorporated in the M1911A, standardized in 1924. The improvements addressed soldier feedback from the trenches, a shorter trigger to accommodate smaller hands, scalloped cuts in the frame behind the trigger for better reach, an arched mainspring housing for improved natural pointing, a longer grip safety spur to prevent hammer bite, wider sights for faster acquisition, and a shortened hammer spur to reduce snagging. These changes, while seemingly minor, reflected the American military's systematic approach to incorporating combat lessons into equipment development. The .45 ACP cartridge itself represented optimized ballistic performance within practical constraints. Operating at a relatively low 21,000 psi chamber pressure compared to 35,000 psi for 9mm Parabellum, the round prioritized reliability and barrel longevity. The 230-grain projectiles, 0.451 inch in diameter, created a wound channel significantly larger than its caliber due to tissue displacement. At 830 feet per second, the bullet traveled just below the speed of sound, avoiding the instability that occurs during transonic flight. The heavy bullet retained energy well, maintaining lethal force even at extended handgun ranges of 50 yards. When America entered World War II, the M1911A1 production transformed from peacetime trickle to wartime flood, demonstrating American industrial might at its apex. Colt's Manufacturing Company, holder of the original patents and production expertise, immediately expanded production at their Hartford, Connecticut facility. But even Colt's maximum capacity, approximately 800 pistols per day by 1943, could not meet demand. The Ordnance Department, under Brigadier General Gladian Barnes, orchestrated one of the most successful distributed manufacturing programs of the war. Unlike the artisanal approach required for complex weapons, the M1911, A1's robust design, allowed mass production techniques. Contracts went to companies with no previous firearms experience but strong manufacturing capabilities. Remington Rand, the typewriter manufacturer, received their first contract in March 1942. Their Syracuse, New York plant, retooled from producing typing machines and adding devices, ultimately manufactured 877,000 M1911A1 pistols, more than any other contractor, including Colt. Their production methodology revolutionized pistol manufacturing. Extensive use of stamping instead of forging, automated checkering of grip frames, and statistical quality control that maintained tolerances while speeding production. Ithaca Gun Company of New York, traditionally a shotgun manufacturer, produced 369,129 pistols. Their innovative use of investment casting for small parts reduced machining time by 60%. Union Switch and Signal Company of Swissvale, Pennsylvania, a railroad equipment manufacturer, produced 55,000 pistols of exceptional quality, incorporating improved heat treatment processes that extended barrel life by 30%. The Singer Manufacturing Company's contribution, though numerically small at 500 pistols, demonstrated American industrial flexibility. These sewing machine manufacturers produced educational guns of such quality that they remained the most sought-after M1911 variants among collectors. Singer developed tooling and processes later transferred to other manufacturers, multiplying their impact beyond their direct production. Part standardization was absolute. Any component from any manufacturer would function in any frame. Tolerances were deliberately loose, 0.03 inches to 0.05 inches in most critical dimensions, ensuring function despite manufacturing variations, field contamination, or thermal expansion. This interchangeability proved crucial when depot-level maintenance often involved assembling functional pistols from components of multiple damaged weapons. The ammunition supply chain matched weapon production. Frankfurt Arsenal, the Army's primary ammunition facility, produced over 1 billion rounds of .45 ACP during the war. Western Cartridge Company, Remington Arms, and Winchester Repeating Arms added another 2 billion rounds. Quality control was stringent. Every lot underwent accuracy testing, pressure testing, and function testing in multiple weapons. Specifications remained consistent throughout production. 230-grain bullet, 5.00 grains of powder, either bullseye or similar burning rate, producing 830 feet per second velocity, plus or minus 25 feet per second. Special ammunition variants demonstrated American innovation. The M12 shot cartridge, developed for aircrew survival kits, contained 118 pieces of number 7.5 birdshot in a paper capsule, effective against small game to 10 feet. The improved M15 shot cartridge used a blue wax capsule for better moisture resistance. Tracer rounds for training allowed shooters to see their bullet paths. Proof loads worked with statonic-stained cases tested +P pressure resistance during manufacturing. The Marine Corps Table of Organization evolution reflected combat lessons about pistol importance. In 1942, a Marine division was authorized 798 pistols, primarily for officers, NCOs, and crew-served weapon teams. By December 1943, after Tarawawa, this increased to 1,377. By 1945, the authorization reached 1,077 pistols per division. The 1st Marine Division on Okinawa actually carried over 2,000 M1911A1s, with many riflemen acquiring pistols through unofficial channels. Distribution prioritized combat units. The 2nd Marine Division at Tarawawa carried 456 M1911A1 pistols for approximately 18,000 Marines, 1 per 12 men. By Iwo Jima, the 5th Marine Division carried 1,789 pistols for similar strength, 1 per 10 men. Army units showed similar patterns. The 77th Infantry Division on Okinawa carried 1,234 M1911A1s among 16,000 soldiers. The Type 14 Nambu represented Imperial Japan's attempt to create a modern military sidearm, but its development history reveals the fundamental limitations that would doom it in combat. Colonel Kijiro Nambu, often called the John Browning of Japan, designed his first semi-automatic pistol in 1902. This Type A Grandpa Nambu superficially resembled the Luga with its exposed barrel and distinctive knurled cocking knob, but operated on entirely different principles. The Type 14, adopted in Taisho 14, 1926, in the Western calendar, evolved from earlier Nambu designs but incorporated supposed improvements based on Japanese military experience in China. The pistol utilized a locked breech mechanism with a floating locking block. Conceptually sound, but requiring precise manufacturing tolerances. The 8x22mm Nambu cartridge, unique to Japanese weapons, fired a 102-grain bullet at approximately 1,065 feet per second from the Type 14's 4.6-inch barrel. On paper, certain specifications seemed superior to the M1911. The Type 14 held 8 rounds versus 7. Muzzle velocity exceeded the 45 ACP by 200 feet per second. The pistol weighed 2.03 pounds unloaded, nearly half a pound less than the M1911A. Initial production models from Nagoya Arsenal and Kokura Arsenal showed excellent craftsmanship, with deep bluing and careful hand-fitting of parts. However, these surface advantages masked fundamental flaws. The 8x22mm Nambu cartridge, despite higher velocity, generated only 256 foot-pounds of muzzle energy compared to the 45 ACP's 369 foot-pounds, a 31% deficit. The lightweight 102-grain bullet shed velocity rapidly, retaining only 180 foot-pound at 50 yards versus 300 foot-pound for the 45 ACP. The bottlenecked case design, while theoretically aiding feeding, created extraction problems when chambers fouled. Japanese military procurement doctrine created additional complications. Unlike American forces who were issued weapons, Japanese officers were required to purchase their sidearms from their salary. A Type 14 cost 78 yen in 1940, approximately half a lieutenant's monthly pay. This economic barrier meant many officers received minimal training, viewing the pistol as a status symbol rather than a combat tool. Some officers, particularly those from wealthy families, purchased foreign pistols instead. Spanish ruby pistols in .32 ACP or inherited European revolvers were common. The Type 14's design philosophy reflected Japanese tactical doctrine that prioritized spiritual power over firepower. The Imperial Japanese Army's infantry manual devoted more pages to sword technique than pistol marksmanship. Pistols were considered weapons for executing prisoners, controlling subordinates, and ritual suicide, not primary combat tools. This doctrinal blindness prevented recognition of design flaws that would prove fatal in combat. Manufacturing quality deteriorated catastrophically as the war progressed. Pre-war Type 14s featured 17 distinct inspection stamps, careful polishing, and hand-fitting of parts. By 1943, inspection marks reduced to 3, surface finishing was eliminated, and parts interchangeability degraded severely. Late-war production from the Toriyamatsu factory showed tool marks, rough casting, and dimensional variations that would have failed pre-war inspection. The Type 14's most critical design failures centered on its controls and magazine system. The safety lever positioned on the left side above the trigger guard required the shooting hand to shift grip or the support hand to operate, impossible when wounded, carrying equipment, or grappling with an enemy. The magazine release, a spring-loaded lever at the bottom front of the grip, often released inadvertently during handling, leaving the pistol unable to fire due to the magazine disconnect safety. The 1930 modification added a magazine retention spring intended to prevent loss of magazines. This improvement made combat reloading nearly impossible. Magazines had to be yanked out against spring pressure, often requiring both hands. In tropical conditions, corrosion welded magazines in place. Marines reported capturing Type 14s with magazines frozen solid, hammered unsuccessfully in desperate attempts to reload. Production statistics reveal Japan's industrial limitations. From 1926 to 1945, approximately 400,000 Type 14 pistols were manufactured across all arsenals and subcontractors. Monthly production peaked at 3,500 units in 1944, but quality was abysmal. The Nambu Rifle Manufacturing Company, Chuo-Kyo Company, and Tokyo Gas and Electric subsidiaries produced pistols with such poor quality control that parts from different manufacturers or even different production runs from the same factory would not interchange. The Type 14 Nambu's failures in combat weren't isolated incidents, but systematic design flaws that reflected fundamental misunderstanding of combat requirements. Each deficiency, perhaps tolerable in isolation, combined to create a weapon that failed catastrophically under Pacific combat conditions. The safety mechanism represented the most immediate tactical liability. Located above the trigger guard on the left side, the safety lever required either shifting the firing grip, losing sight picture and trigger finger position, or using the support hand. In close combat where milliseconds mattered, this two-handed operation proved fatal. Marines reported numerous instances of Japanese officers futilely attempting to disengage safeties while being overrun. The M1911A1's ambidextrous safety, operable with the thumb of the firing hand while maintaining grip and trigger position, could be disengaged while drawing from the holster. The magazine disconnect safety, intended to prevent accidental discharge with the magazine removed, transformed into a critical vulnerability. When magazines were damaged, lost, or frozen in place by corrosion, the entire weapon became inoperable. Unlike the M1911A1, which would fire its chambered round without a magazine, the Type 14 required a functioning, properly seated magazine to operate. In the coral sand of Tarawa, or volcanic ash of Iwo Jima, where magazines were easily damaged, this feature rendered countless Type 14s useless. The Type 14 lacked a slide hold open device. When the last round fired, only the magazine follower held the bolt open. Removing the magazine allowed the bolt to slam forward, giving no indication the weapon was empty. In combat, shooters discovered empty chambers only when triggers clicked uselessly. The M1911A1 slide lock, activated by the magazine follower, held the slide open after the last round, providing immediate visual and tactile indication of an empty weapon while speeding reloading. Extraction failures plagued the Type 14, particularly with deteriorating ammunition quality. The bottlenecked 8x22mm case, theoretically superior for feeding, created a smaller bearing surface for the extractor. Combined with wartime ammunition using corrosive primers and inconsistent brass cases stuck in chambers or ripped through by extractors, the straight-walled 45 ACP case, with its larger bearing surface and lower pressure, extracted reliably even from fouled chambers. The recoil spring assembly, a complex dual spring system, required precise manufacturing and maintenance. When springs lost tension, accelerated by tropical heat and humidity, cycling became erratic. Failure to return to battery was common, requiring manual slide manipulation. The M1911A1's single recoil spring, even when weakened, usually maintained sufficient function for combat effectiveness. Tropical conditions revealed additional vulnerabilities. The Type 14's tight manufacturing tolerances, acceptable in Japan's temperate climate, became liabilities in the Pacific. Thermal expansion from 115-degree Fahrenheit temperatures on Palau caused actions to bind. Monsoon humidity on Guadalcanal created rust that froze mechanisms within days. The M1911A1's deliberately loose tolerances, derided by target shooters as sloppy, allowed function despite thermal expansion, corrosion, or contamination. Field maintenance presented insurmountable challenges. The Type 14 required tools for disassembly, a luxury unavailable in combat. Complete disassembly involved 34 separate operations and risked losing small springs and pins. The M1911A1 field stripped without tools in seconds. Depress recoil spring plug, rotate bushing, remove recoil spring and guide, push out slide stop, remove slide and barrel. Reassembly reversed the process. Marines could field strip, clean with whatever was available, including urine when water was scarce, and reassemble blindfolded in under 30 seconds. Ammunition quality compounded mechanical failures. By 1944, Japanese industry struggled to maintain consistent powder charges and primer compounds. Captured ammunition tested by American ordnance units showed velocity variations exceeding 200 feet per second within single lots. Squib loads left bullets lodged in barrels. Subsequent rounds caused catastrophic failures. Excessive pressure rounds from double charges, cracked frames, and bulged chambers. American 45 ACP ammunition maintained remarkable consistency throughout the war, with velocity variations rarely exceeding 25 feet per second within lots. The true test of these weapons came in the desperate close-quarters fighting that characterized Pacific Island combat on Guadalcanal during the Battle for Henderson Field on October 24 to 25, 1942. Sergeant John Bassilone's actions demonstrated both the M1911A1's effectiveness and the seamless integration of American weapons systems. While Bassilone is famous for his machine gun defense, witnesses reported his extensive use of his pistol when Japanese soldiers breached the perimeter. Private First Class Nash Phillips, wounded in the battle, later testified, "Bassilone had a machine gun on the go for 3 days and nights without sleep, rest, or food. He was in a good emplacement and causing the Japs lots of trouble, not only firing his machine gun, but also using his pistol." When Japanese soldiers penetrated the line during hand-to-hand fighting, Bassilone's M1911A1 proved decisive. Each 230-grain hollow-point bullet, Marines often modified ball ammunition by cutting crosses in the tips, delivered immediate stopping power. Phillips described seeing Japanese soldiers knocked backward off their feet by Bassilone's pistol fire. The Japanese assault on Henderson Field involved approximately 3,000 soldiers from the Sendai Division. Marine defenders numbered fewer than 700 along Bassilone's sector. The Japanese achieved local numerical superiority of nearly 5-1, necessitating maximum effectiveness from every American weapon. In such circumstances, the difference between the 45 ACP's immediate incapacitation and the 8mm Nambu's lesser stopping power multiplied across hundreds of individual encounters. At Tarawa, Staff Sergeant William Bordelong's actions, though primarily involving demolition charges, included critical moments where small arms made the difference. Bordelong, an engineer with the 1st Battalion, 18th Marines, landed in the assault waves on November 20, 1943. His amphibious tractor took numerous hits, killing all but 4 of the Marines aboard. Bordelong's mission was to destroy Japanese pillboxes with demolition charges, but approaching these positions required suppressive fire. After placing charges on 2 pillboxes, Bordelong was wounded by machine gun fire. His demolition charges exhausted. Marine combat correspondent Staff Sergeant David Dempsey, who witnessed the action, reported that Bordelong grabbed a rifle and continued fighting, covering other Marines as they moved forward. While accounts focus on his demolition work, the close-quarters nature of the fighting meant pistols were constantly employed. Bordelong's M1911A1, like those of all Marine engineers, served as his last line of defense while placing charges against enemy positions. The Type 14's combat failures were equally well documented. On Tarawa, Marine Private Robert Sherrod, a Time Life correspondent embedded with the 2nd Marine Division, witnessed a Japanese officer's desperate struggle with his Nambu. The officer was screaming at his men, trying to shoot his pistol. He kept pulling the trigger, but nothing happened. The gun was jammed. Sand, maybe, or a bad magazine? A Marine shot him with a .45 from maybe 20 feet. He flew backward like he'd been hit with a sledgehammer. Similar accounts proliferated across every island battlefield. On Saipan, June 15, 1944, during the massive Japanese banzai charge that became the largest of the Pacific War, Marine Corporal John De Alessandro of the 27th Marines described close combat in pre-dawn darkness. They came at us in waves, officers in front waving swords and pistols. I saw one officer trying to clear his jammed Nambu while running toward us. He was working the action frantically when I shot him with my .45. One shot center mass and he went down hard. The .45 would stop them cold. The impact was like hitting them with a baseball bat. The mathematical reality of stopping power became apparent in after-action medical reports. Marine Corps medical personnel documented wound characteristics showing that 45 ACP hits to the torso created temporary wound cavities exceeding 4-inch in diameter, causing immediate blood pressure drop and nervous system disruption. The 8mm Nambu, with its lighter, faster bullet, created wounds barely larger than its caliber, often requiring multiple hits for incapacitation. Lieutenant Colonel Louis Chesty Puller, commanding 1st Battalion 7th Marines at Guadalcanal, noted in his after-action report, the .45 automatic pistol proved invaluable in repelling Japanese infiltrators and banzai attacks. Multiple instances were observed where single rounds from the .45 immediately stopped attacking Japanese soldiers, while enemy officers armed with their issued pistols failed to inflict casualties even at close range. The disparity between the M1911A1 and Type 14 Nambu reflected fundamentally different military philosophies shaped by distinct cultural and historical experiences. American doctrine forged in the frontier wars and colonial conflicts prioritized firepower and individual marksmanship. Japanese doctrine, rooted in samurai tradition and Yamato Damashi, Japanese spirit, emphasized spiritual power over material advantage. The Thompson-Lagarde tests had provided American forces with scientific justification for maximum stopping power. The conclusion that nothing less than .45 caliber would suffice became dogma. This wasn't mere preference, but evidence-based requirement. The tests measured not just lethality, but immediate incapacitation, the ability to stop an attacker before they could close distance or continue fighting. The temporal element was crucial in close combat. The difference between immediate and eventual incapacitation measured in American lives. American training reflected this emphasis on practical effectiveness. At Paris Island and Camp Pendleton, Marines fired thousands of rounds in pistol training. The course began with bullseye marksmanship, learning trigger control, sight picture, and breathing, then progressed to combat shooting. Marines learned to fire from retention position with the pistol against their ribs, point shooting without using sights, and engaging multiple targets while moving. The standard qualification required 70% hits on man-sized targets at 25 yards, firing 50 rounds under time pressure. The M1911A1's manual of arms emphasized combat efficiency. The Israeli draw technique, though not called that in 1943, was standard. Drawing while simultaneously thumbing off the safety, finger entering trigger guard only when the muzzle cleared the holster and oriented toward target. Marines practiced malfunction clearances, tap, rack, bang, until they became automatic. They learned to count shots, reloading before the slide locked back when possible, maintaining continuous fire capability. Japanese pistol training remained minimal and ceremonial. The Imperial Japanese Army's training manual devoted 2 pages to pistol marksmanship versus 12 pages to sword technique. Officers received perhaps 50 rounds of annual training ammunition when available. The emphasis was on precision shooting at stationary targets from formal stances, not combat effectiveness. Many officers arrived in combat having fired fewer rounds through their Type 14s than American Marines fired in a single training day. Japanese tactical doctrine viewed pistols as symbols of authority rather than combat tools. The weapon's primary purposes included maintaining discipline, shooting deserters or cowards, honorable suicide when capture seemed imminent, and executing prisoners. The idea of using pistols as primary combat weapons in assault seemed absurd when the warrior's sword represented his soul. This philosophical blindness prevented recognition of the pistol's tactical importance in modern close combat. American doctrine evolved continuously based on combat feedback. After Guadalcanal, training emphasized shooting from prone and supine positions, common when wounded or taking cover. After Tarawa, where Marines fought in waist-deep water, training included waterborne operations, keeping weapons dry during landing, clearing water from barrels, and immediate action after immersion. After reports of Japanese infiltrators in Marine foxholes, training incorporated weapon retention techniques and contact distance shooting. The ammunition philosophy differed radically. Americans designed the .45 ACP for one purpose: maximum stopping power within practical constraints. Velocity was deliberately kept subsonic to avoid transonic instability. Bullet weight maximized momentum transfer. The round's rainbow trajectory at distance was irrelevant. Pistol fights occurred within 25 yards. Japanese 8mm Nambu development prioritized velocity and trajectory, seeking rifle-like performance from a pistol cartridge. This pursuit of inappropriate characteristics sacrificed stopping power for negligible practical advantage. Cultural factors influenced weapons employment. American individualism encouraged personal initiative and adaptation. Marines modified their M1911A1 with filed sights for faster draw, stippled front straps for better grip, and shortened triggers for smaller hands. Such modifications would have been unthinkable in the Japanese military, where conformity was absolute and initiative discouraged below senior ranks. The Japanese concept of bamboo spear spirit, the belief that spiritual power could overcome material disadvantage, pervaded military thinking. When Chinese forces complained about the Type 14's inadequacy against Russian-supplied weapons, Japanese advisors responded that insufficient warrior spirit, not inferior weapons, caused failures. This denial of material reality prevented systematic improvement of weapon systems. American pragmatism demanded measurable effectiveness. After Guadalcanal, training emphasized shooting from prone and supine positions, common when wounded or taking cover. After Tarawa, where Marines fought in waist-deep water, training included waterborne operations, keeping weapons dry during landing, clearing water from barrels, and immediate action after immersion. After reports of Japanese infiltrators in marine foxholes, training incorporated weapon retention techniques and contact distance shooting. The ammunition philosophy differed radically. Americans designed the .45 ACP for one purpose: maximum stopping power within practical constraints. Velocity was deliberately kept subsonic to avoid transonic instability. Bullet weight maximized momentum transfer. The round's rainbow trajectory at distance was irrelevant. Pistol fights occurred within 25 yards. Japanese 8mm Nambu development prioritized velocity and trajectory, seeking rifle-like performance from a pistol cartridge. This pursuit of inappropriate characteristics sacrificed stopping power for negligible practical advantage. Cultural factors influenced weapons employment. American individualism encouraged personal initiative and adaptation. Marines modified their M1911A1 with filed sights for faster draw, stippled front straps for better grip, and shortened triggers for smaller hands. Such modifications would have been unthinkable in the Japanese military, where conformity was absolute and initiative discouraged below senior ranks. The Japanese concept of bamboo spear spirit, the belief that spiritual power could overcome material disadvantage, pervaded military thinking. When Chinese forces complained about the Type 14's inadequacy against Russian-supplied weapons, Japanese advisors responded that insufficient warrior spirit, not inferior weapons, caused failures. This denial of material reality prevented systematic improvement of weapon systems. American pragmatism demanded measurable effectiveness. After Guadalcanal, training emphasized shooting from prone and supine positions, common when wounded or taking cover. After Tarawa, where Marines fought in waist-deep water, training included waterborne operations, keeping weapons dry during landing, clearing water from barrels, and immediate action after immersion. After reports of Japanese infiltrators in marine foxholes, training incorporated weapon retention techniques and contact distance shooting. The ammunition philosophy differed. The Bureau of Ordnance conducted continuous testing of ammunition performance, accumulating data on velocity, pressure, accuracy, and terminal ballistics. Feedback from combat units drove modifications: improved magazine springs after reports of feeding problems, harder extractors after reports of extraction failures, enhanced rust-resentive finishes for tropical service. Each modification underwent testing before implementation, ensuring improvements actually improved performance. The Pacific Theater provided the ultimate proving ground for weapons reliability, subjecting both American and Japanese pistols to environmental extremes that would have been impossible to replicate in peacetime testing. From the freezing Aleutians to the equatorial Solomons, from coral atolls barely above sea level to volcanic mountains, these environments tested every aspect of weapons design and manufacturing. Guadalcanal's climate represented tropical hell. Rainfall exceeded 200 inches annually, with humidity constantly at 100%. Temperatures ranged from 75 degrees at night to 95 degrees daily, but felt like 115 degrees, according to marine accounts. Metal rusted overnight. Leather rotted within weeks. Wooden stocks warped and split. In this environment, the M1911A1's parkerized finish, a phosphate coating that absorbed oil, proved superior to bluing. Even when surface rust appeared, the pistol continued functioning. The Type 14's blued finish, beautiful when new, provided minimal corrosion protection. Surface rust appeared within days, progressing to deep pitting within weeks. Marine Armorer Sergeant Thomas Morrison with the 1st Marine Division on Guadalcanal documented maintenance challenges in his journal. The 45s need daily cleaning, but keep working even when they look like hell. We're using motor oil, gun oil, even coconut oil, anything to keep them running. The captured pistols rust solid in 3 days. Their springs break when you try to force them open. We've got a pile of them we can't even disassemble. Tarawa presented different challenges. Coral sand finer than talcum powder that infiltrated every mechanism. The island's lack of vegetation meant no shade from equatorial sun that heated metal to burning temperatures. Marines wrapped pistol grips with cloth or tape to prevent burns. Water was critically scarce, 5 gallons per day for a battalion, making weapon cleaning impossible. The M1911A1's loose tolerances allowed functioning despite sand infiltration. Marines learned to work the slide vigorously before use, allowing sand to fall through gaps. The Type 14's tight tolerances meant sand particles locked mechanisms solid. Plyo in September 1944 recorded the highest temperatures of the Pacific War. Official readings reached 115 degrees F, but temperatures in fighting positions among the coral ridges exceeded 120 degrees F. Marines suffered more heat casualties than combat wounds on some days. Metal expanded significantly at these temperatures. The M1911, designed with thermal expansion tolerances, continued functioning. The Type 14, with precise peacetime tolerances, experienced binding as parts expanded differentially. Marine Private Eugene Sledge, with K Company, 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines on Plano, wrote, "Everything metal was too hot to touch. We wrapped our rifle slings around our hands to carry them. Cantons burned our lips. My .45 was so hot the rounds in the magazine were warm to the touch when I unloaded it. But it worked, always worked." Iwo Jima's volcanic ash presented unique challenges. The fine black sand, actually pulverized volcanic glass, was highly abrasive. It infiltrated sealed mechanisms, accelerating wear exponentially. The island's sulfur springs created corrosive vapor that etched metal. After 5 weeks of combat, many rifles and machine guns required replacement due to bore erosion. M1911A1 pistols, with their simple mechanisms and robust construction, maintained function despite accelerated wear. Type 14 suffered extraction failures as chambers eroded and cases stuck. The Aleutian Campaign provided opposite extremes. During the May 1943 Attu invasion, temperatures dropped below freezing with 100-mile-per-hour winds. Lubricants congealed to tar-like consistency. Breath condensation froze on metal, creating ice that locked actions. The M1911 functioned without lubrication. Soldiers learned to clean all oil from the weapons, running them dry. The Type 14's complex dual recoil spring system required lubrication to function, making it inoperable in extreme cold. Saltwater immersion during amphibious operations challenged both designs. At Tarawa, Marines waded 500 yards through chest-deep water under fire. Weapons were completely submerged for 10 to 15 minutes. The M1911, designed with drainage channels and minimal enclosed spaces, could be shaken out and would function immediately. The Type 14, with its enclosed trigger mechanism and complex internals, retained water that had to be disassembled to drain, impossible under fire. Monsoon conditions on New Guinea and the Philippines tested waterproofing. Rain fell continuously for weeks, making it impossible to keep weapons dry. Everything organic rotted: leather holsters, cloth, wood grips. The M1911's plastic grips, introduced in 1943, were impervious to moisture. Steel parts required constant oiling but maintained function. The Type 14's wooden grips, especially on late war models, absorbed moisture, swelling until they cracked frames. The magazine retention spring, added in 1939, rusted in place, making magazine changes impossible. Maintenance supplies reflected different philosophies. American forces received abundant cleaning materials: bore brushes, cleaning rods, patches, CLP, cleaner, lubricant, preservative, and specialized lubricants for extreme conditions. Every Marine carried a pistol cleaning kit. Japanese forces, by 1944, often lacked basic cleaning supplies. Captured Japanese documents indicated units sharing single cleaning rods, using palm fronds as patches, and motor oil when gun oil was unavailable. Field modifications demonstrated American adaptability. Marines learned to polish feed ramps with emicloth to improve feeding. relieve slide-to-frame fit with valve grinding compound to improve reliability, and replace recoil springs with springs from damaged weapons to maintain proper tension. Such modifications performed at battalion level kept weapons functional despite extreme wear. Japanese forces, lacking spare parts and modification capability, simply discarded malfunctioning Type 14s. The Battle of Okinawa, commencing April 1, 1945, represented the ultimate test of American and Japanese small arms in the Pacific War's largest amphibious operation. Sea-named Operation Iceberg, the invasion pitted 183,000 American soldiers and Marines against 110,000 Japanese defenders on an island that would serve as the staging area for the planned invasion of Japan. The 82-day battle would demonstrate with finality the superiority of American weapons in the war's most savage fighting. Okinawa's terrain differed radically from previous Pacific battlefields. The island stretched 60 miles long and varied from 2 to 18 miles wide, featuring open farmland in the north and rugged ridges honeycombed with caves in the south. Japanese General Mitsudo Ushima had months to prepare defenses, creating an elaborate system of interconnected caves, tunnels, and fortified positions that would channel American forces into killing zones. This battlefield would demand close-quarters combat, where pistols often determined survival. The American force included the entire 10th Army under Lieutenant General Simon Bolivar Buckner Jr., comprising the Army's 24th Corps, 7th, 27th, 77th, and 96th Infantry Divisions, and the Marines' 3rd Amphibious Corps, 1st and 6th Marine Divisions. These units carried over 15,000 M1911A pistols, nearly one for every 12 combat troops. Ammunition supplies included 10 million rounds of 45 ACP, reflecting lessons learned about ammunition consumption in prolonged operations. The Japanese 32nd Army, reinforced by naval troops and Okinawan conscripts, represented Japan's last cohesive military force outside the home islands. Officers carried Type 14 Nambus, but ammunition shortages were critical. Documents captured from the Japanese 62nd Division indicated an allocation of only 20 rounds per pistol for the entire campaign. By contrast, American forces carried 21 rounds per pistol as basic load with unlimited resupply available. The initial landings on April 1, 1945, Easter Sunday, and April Fool's Day met surprisingly light resistance as Ushima had withdrawn his forces to prepared positions in the south. However, when American forces encountered the Japanese main defensive lines at Kakazu Ridge on April 9th, the battle's true character emerged. The fighting devolved into savage close-quarters combat, where distances were measured in feet and survival often depended on who could bring effective firepower to bear fastest. Technical Sergeant Beaufort Anderson of the 96th Infantry Division earned the Medal of Honor on April 13th during the assault on Kakazu Ridge. When his unit was pinned down, Anderson single-handedly attacked Japanese positions with grenades and small arms. His citation notes he eliminated 25 Japanese soldiers in close combat. Witnesses reported Anderson extensively used his M1911A1 when Japanese soldiers emerged from spider holes at point-blank range. "The 45 saved my life a dozen times that day," Anderson later stated. "When they popped up from holes right under you, there was no time to swing a rifle around. The 45 knocked them down instantly." The Japanese conducted massive counterattacks throughout the battle, culminating in Operation Tenno on May 4th, when Ushima launched his entire reserve in a desperate offensive. During this attack, close combat became general across the entire front. Marine Private First Class Harold Adgerholm of the 4th Battalion, 10th Marines would receive a posthumous Medal of Honor for evacuating 45 wounded Marines under fire. Witnesses reported Adgerholm carried his M1911A1 in one hand while dragging wounded with the other, firing at Japanese infiltrators who approached his casualties. Cave warfare on Okinawa created unique combat conditions that maximized the importance of pistols. The Japanese had transformed natural caves into elaborate defensive complexes with multiple levels, interconnecting tunnels, and concealed firing ports. Attacking these positions required Marines and soldiers to enter confined spaces where rifles were unwieldy. The M1911A1 became the primary weapon for cave clearing. Marine Corporal Donald Hiss of the 1st Marine Division described cave operations. You'd throw in white phosphorus grenades to burn out the oxygen, then go in with pistols and flashlights. The .45 was perfect for this work. In those confined spaces, the concussion from the .45 was stunning. We'd put tactical lights, flashlights taped to the barrel on our pistols. You'd see movement, point, and shoot. The .45 would blow Japanese soldiers backward into the cave walls. The technical superiority of the .45 ACP in confined spaces became mathematically quantifiable. In caves and tunnels, the .45 subsonic velocity meant less disorienting muzzle blast for the shooter while delivering maximum energy to targets. The heavy bullet's momentum carried through web gear and equipment that might deflect lighter, faster projectiles. Terminal ballistic studies conducted post-war showed the .45 ACP created larger temporary wound cavities in gelatin than any other military pistol cartridge. Crucial when targets had to be immediately incapacitated in confined spaces where wounded enemies could detonate grenades. Sugarloaf Hill, a small mound that anchored the Japanese shoreline, became the site of the most intense close combat from May 12th to 18th. The 6th Marine Division suffered over 2,000 casualties taking this single position. Marines attacked 17 times before finally securing the hill. During these assaults, combat often occurred at handshaking distance. Marine Sergeant James Stevens recalled, "We were fighting in the rain, in mud up to our knees. Japanese soldiers would emerge from hidden positions right among us. Your rifle would be clogged with mud, but the .45 always worked. I saw Marines and Japanese soldiers shooting at each other from 5 feet apart. The Marine with the .45 always won those encounters." By late May, the failure of Japanese small arms became critical. The 32nd Army's operations officer, Colonel Hiromichi Yahara, wrote in his post-war memoir, "Our Type 14 pistols had become almost useless. Ammunition was nearly exhausted, and those weapons still functioning often failed due to rain and mud. American soldiers seemed to have unlimited ammunition for their powerful pistols, which could kill a man instantly, even with peripheral hits." The monsoon season, beginning in mid-May, turned Okinawa into a mudscape. Foxholes filled with water, weapons submerged repeatedly. The M1911A1's drainage channels and loose tolerances allowed it to function despite mud immersion. Marines learned to keep pistols inside their shirts when not in use, using body heat to prevent rust. The Type 14, with its enclosed design and tight tolerances, became hopelessly clogged with mud. Ammunition quality disparities became extreme by Okinawa. American .45 ACP ammunition maintained consistent performance throughout the campaign. LOT testing showed velocity variations of less than 30 feet per second and no misfires in 100,000 rounds tested. Japanese 8mm Nambu ammunition, produced in 1945 under bombing and material shortages, showed catastrophic quality control failures. Captured ammunition tested by American ordnance units revealed 30% misfires due to faulty primers, velocity variations exceeding 300 feet per second within single lots, case head separations from brittle brass, and squib loads that lodged bullets in barrels. The Japanese conducted their final organized resistance in the Kan Peninsula at Okinawa's southern tip in mid-June. Here, in the maze of coral caves and ridges, combat reached its most primitive level. American forces used flamethrowers, demolition charges, and small arms to systematically eliminate Japanese positions. The 96th Infantry Division reported expending 450,000 rounds of .45 ACP ammunition during June alone, more than many divisions used in entire European campaigns. Private First Class Desmond Doss, the conscientious objector medic who refused to carry weapons, provided unique testimony about pistol effectiveness. Serving with the 77th Infantry Division, Das witnessed countless close combat engagements while treating wounded. In his post-war interviews, he stated, "The difference between our 45s and their pistols was like night and day. I saw Japanese officers empty their pistols into our boys who kept fighting. But when our boys hit a Japanese soldier with a 45, he went down and stayed down. That pistol saved many American lives." The battle statistics tell the story of American material superiority. American forces suffered 12,520 killed and 36,631 wounded. Japanese losses included approximately 110,000 military deaths plus 100,000 Okinawan civilians. The 10-to-1 kill ratio in America's favor reflected superior firepower at every level, from naval guns to individual pistols. In close combat, where individual weapons determined survival, the M1911A1's superiority multiplied American effectiveness. The final accounting of M1911A1 versus Type 14 production reveals more than numbers. It exposes the fatal delusion of Imperial Japan attempting to fight an industrial war with artisanal production methods. By war's end, American factories had produced 1,878,000 M1911 pistols between 1941 and 1945. Japan managed approximately 400,000 Type 14 pistols over nearly 2 decades, from 1926 to 1945. This 4.7-to-1 production ratio during just the war years understates the true disparity when considering quality standardization and ammunition supply. American production methodology revolutionized manufacturing. Remington Rand's Syracuse plant, converting from typewriter production, achieved remarkable efficiency through innovation. They introduced broach rifling, cutting perfect barrels in single passes rather than traditional cut rifling requiring multiple passes. Statistical process control developed by Walter Schuhart and implemented by Western Electric engineers maintained tolerances while increasing speed. By 1943, Remington Rand produced 1,000 pistols daily, with fewer than 1% rejection rate. The learning curve demonstrated American industrial adaptability. Colt, with decades of experience, required 1.2 man-hours to produce one M1911A, one frame, in 1942. Remington Rand, starting from zero firearms experience, achieved 0.8 man-hours per frame by 1943 through superior industrial engineering. Ithaca Gun Company introduced fixture designs that reduced machining setups by 60%. Innovations later adopted across all manufacturers. Parts interchangeability was absolute. In November 1943, Army Ordnance conducted a demonstration at Aberdeen Proving Ground. Armorers disassembled 100 M1911A1 pistols from different manufacturers, mixed all parts randomly, and reassembled them blindfolded. All 100 pistols functioned perfectly. This interchangeability proved crucial when depot-level maintenance involved assembling functional weapons from damaged ones. Japanese Type 14 parts, even from the same manufacturer, often required hand-fitting. The economic efficiency was staggering. In 1942, the unit cost of an M1911A1 was $31.42. By 1945, improved production methods reduced this to $15, less than half despite wartime inflation. The Japanese Type 14, requiring extensive hand-fitting, cost 70 yen throughout the war, equivalent to $31.20 in 1941, but representing a far greater portion of Japanese industrial capacity. Ammunition production dwarfed weapon manufacturing. American factories produced approximately 3.5 billion rounds of .45 ACP during World War II. This equated to 1,862 rounds for every M1911 manufactured, sufficient for extensive training and combat consumption. Japanese 8mm Nambu ammunition totaled approximately 100 million rounds from 1926 to 1945, or 250 rounds per pistol over 2 decades. By 1945, Japanese forces allocated 20 rounds per pistol for entire campaigns. Quality control revealed philosophical differences. Every American M1911A1 underwent proof testing with high-pressure cartridges generating 30% over standard pressure. Barrels were air-gauged to ensure dimensional consistency. Function testing required 100 rounds without malfunction. Random samples underwent 5,000-round endurance tests. Metallurgical analysis ensured proper heat treatment and material composition. Japanese quality control, minimal before the war, essentially disappeared by 1944. Late-war Type 14s show tool marks, dimensional variations, and soft metal that would have failed any inspection standard. The supply chain comparison was equally telling. American manufacturers received specialized steel alloys, SAE 4140 for barrels, 8620 for frames, produced to exacting specifications. Carbide cutting tools, themselves products of American industrial superiority, maintained precise dimensions through thousands of parts. Japanese manufacturers by 1944 used whatever steel was available. Captured Type 14s show frames made from recycled ship armor, barrels from artillery brass, and springs from salvaged automotive parts. Subcontractor networks multiplied American advantages. Grip manufacturers Koch Plastics Company, Franzite Company, Keys Fiber Company produced millions of synthetic grips impervious to tropical conditions. Spring manufacturers Wolf Company, Associated Spring Corporation provided consistent springs heat-treated for specific tension requirements. Magazine contractors Scoville Manufacturing, Riston Manufacturing produced magazines to tolerances ensuring universal fit. Japanese production remained vertically integrated within arsenals, limiting production capacity and preventing specialization benefits. The training ammunition allocation demonstrated different priorities. American forces allocated 240 rounds per man for basic pistol qualification, 500 rounds for advanced training. Combat units received 100 rounds monthly for sustainment training. Total training expenditure exceeded 500 million rounds. Japanese officers purchasing their own ammunition typically fired fewer than 100 rounds annually. Many arrived in combat having fired their Type 14 fewer times than American Marines fired in single training sessions. Replacement rates revealed combat realities. American forces replaced approximately 15% of M1911 pistols annually due to combat loss, damage beyond repair, or excessive wear. The industrial base easily supported this attrition while increasing total inventory. Japanese forces couldn't replace losses. Units that lost pistols to combat damage simply went without. By Okinawa, many Japanese officers carried swords exclusively. Their pistols long since failed. The Pacific War's final accounting revealed truths that transcended mere technical specifications or production statistics. In the crucible of history's largest naval war, fought across millions of square miles of ocean and thousands of islands, the superiority of the M1911A1 over the Type 14 Nambu represented American industrial democracy's triumph over Japanese military feudalism. The mathematics of terminal ballistics were inexorable. The 45 ACP's 230-grain bullet at 830 feet per second delivered 370 foot-pounds of kinetic energy, creating temporary wound cavities exceeding 4 inches in diameter in ballistic gelatin. The 8mm Nambu's 102-grain bullet at 1,605 feet per second generated 256 foot-pounds, creating wound channels barely larger than caliber. This 44% energy advantage translated directly to stopping power, the ability to immediately incapacitate an enemy before they could continue attacking. But energy alone didn't tell the complete story. The 45 ACP's heavy bullet retained velocity better, maintaining 89% of muzzle energy at 50 yards versus 76% for the 8mm Nambu. The larger frontal area, 451-inch versus 320-inch, created 98% greater tissue displacement. The subsonic velocity eliminated ballistic crack, reducing shooter disorientation in confined spaces. The straight-walled case extracted reliably from fouled chambers. Every technical parameter favored the American cartridge. The weapons themselves reflected their cartridges' characteristics. The M1911A1's robust construction, weighing 39 ounces recoil while providing steady shooting platform. The single-action trigger, breaking at 4 to 5 pounds, enabled precise shot placement under stress. The grip safety and manual safety prevented accidental discharge while allowing instant readiness. The 7-round magazine, while holding one less round than the Type 14, could be changed in seconds, and the pistol would still fire its chambered round without magazine present. The Type 14's attempted advantages proved illusory. Its lighter weight, 32 ounces, made recoil harder to control. The heavy, gritty trigger pull degraded accuracy. The safety location required two-handed operation. The magazine retention spring made reloading nearly impossible under stress. The magazine disconnect safety transformed magazine damage into complete weapon failure. Every supposed improvement degraded combat effectiveness. Combat validation was overwhelming. At Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Saipan, Plu, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa, the M1911A1 proved itself in thousands of close-quarters engagements. Marines and soldiers trusted their lives to the pistol, knowing it would function despite mud, sand, water, or neglect. The psychological impact multiplied its effectiveness. Japanese soldiers learned to fear the distinctive boom of the .45, knowing it meant immediate death. Post-war analysis by the United States Strategic Bombing Survey included extensive interviews with surviving Japanese officers. Colonel Susumu Nishiura, staff officer with the 32nd Army on Okinawa, stated, "Your .45 caliber automatic pistol was greatly feared. It would knock a man down with hits to extremities. Our pistols required multiple center hits to stop an American soldier. This disparity in effectiveness was demoralizing to our forces." Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kurabayashi, commanding Japanese forces on Iwo Jima, wrote in his final report before his death, "American material superiority is overwhelming. Their individual weapons, particularly their powerful pistols, give them great advantage in close combat, where spiritual power cannot overcome mechanical superiority." This admission from an officer who had spent years in America as a military attaché revealed Japanese recognition of their material inadequacy. The industrial disparity was insurmountable. American factories produced more M1911A pistols in 1943 alone, over 600,000, than Japan manufactured Type 14s in 2 decades. American quality improved throughout production, while Japanese quality collapsed. American ammunition supply was unlimited, while Japanese forces hoarded every cartridge. American training was extensive, while Japanese training was minimal. Every measurable parameter favored American forces by factors of 3 to 1 to 10 to 1. The human cost crystallized these advantages. Throughout the Pacific War, Marine and Army units armed with M1911A1 pistols consistently achieved kill ratios exceeding 10 to 1 in close combat. On Iwo Jima, 6,820 Americans died versus 21,000 Japanese, a 3 to 1 ratio despite attacking fortified positions. On Okinawa, 12,520 Americans died versus 110,000 Japanese, an 8.81 ratio. While many factors contributed to these disparities, the effectiveness of individual weapons in close combat played a crucial role. Veterans' testimonies provided the final verdict. Marine Gunnery Sergeant John Basilone, before his death on Iwo Jima, wrote, "The .44 automatic is the finest military pistol ever made. It hits like a sledgehammer and never fails. One shot ends any argument." Technical Sergeant Charles Lindbergh of the 3rd Marine Division stated, "That pistol saved more Marine lives than any other weapon. When Japanese soldiers got inside our lines at night, the .45 was what stopped them." Japanese veterans who survived American .45 ACP hits bore distinctive scars. Dr. Taro Ueno, treating veterans at Tokyo Veterans Hospital post-war, noted, "Wounds from the American .45 caliber pistol were immediately recognizable decades later. The massive tissue damage created distinctive scarring patterns. Veterans shot with this weapon considered themselves fortunate to have survived. The M1911A1's legacy extended far beyond World War II. Special Operations Forces carried it through Korea, Vietnam, and into the 21st century. The Type 14 vanished immediately after Japanese surrender, replaced by American weapons. Modern Japanese self-defense forces have never attempted to design indigenous pistols. Recognizing the futility of competing with Western arms development, the broader implications transcended weapons. The M1911 represented American industrial democracy, standardized, mass-produced, effective, and available to every soldier regardless of rank or wealth. The Type 14 represented Japanese military feudalism, handcrafted, inconsistent, inadequate, and restricted to officers who could afford purchase. These weapons embodied their society's approaches to warfare. In the final analysis, the Pacific War validated the Thomson-Lagarde test's conclusion from 1904. In close combat, stopping power determines survival. The M1911 delivered that stopping power reliably, consistently, in any condition, millions of times. The Type 14 Nambu failed to deliver adequate performance even under ideal conditions. This disparity, multiplied across millions of individual combats, contributed significantly to American victory. The mathematics of death in the Pacific War were precise and unforgiving. When Staff Sergeant William Bordelong charged Japanese pillboxes on Tarawa, when Sergeant John Basilone held Henderson Field on Guadalcanal, when thousands of unnamed Marines and soldiers fought in nameless caves on forgotten islands, they carried a weapon that wouldn't fail them, the M1911 automatic pistol firing the .45 ACP cartridge. Every trigger pull launched a 230-grain projectile at 830 feet per second, delivering 370 foot-pounds of kinetic energy, creating wound channels that immediately incapacitated enemy combatants. This simple equation, mass times velocity squared divided by 450,024, determines survival in countless close-quarters engagements. The Japanese Type 14 Nambu, firing its 102-grain bullet at 1,605 feet per second for 256 foot-pounds of energy, consistently failed this mathematical test of combat effectiveness. The production statistics told an equally decisive story. American factories manufactured 1,878,742 M1911 pistols during World War II, supported by 3.5 billion rounds of ammunition. Japan produced approximately 400,000 Type 14s over 2 decades, with perhaps 100 million total. This 4.7-to-1 production advantage in pistols and 35-to-1 advantage in ammunition during just the war years represented industrial supremacy that no amount of spiritual power could overcome. But beyond numbers lay a fundamental truth about modern warfare. Victory belongs to nations that combine industrial capacity with engineering excellence, that value individual soldiers' lives enough to equip them with the best possible weapons, that learn from combat experience and systematically improve their tools of war. The M1911 embodied these principles. The Type 14 Nambu represented their antithesis. In the end, the Pacific War's outcome was determined by many factors: strategy, logistics, code breaking, naval power, and atomic weapons. But in those desperate moments when combat reduced to its most primitive form, one man facing another at arm's length with death seconds away, the American Marine or soldier with an M1911A held overwhelming advantage over his Japanese opponent with a Type 14 Nambu. The thunder of the .45 ACP echoed from Pearl Harbor to Tokyo Bay. Each shot a small but decisive contribution to victory. The M1911 didn't win the Pacific War alone, but in the brutal arithmetic of close combat, it ensured that American forces held a crushing advantage that multiplied across thousands of engagements to help determine the war's